Welcome guys. In this video we are going to discuss router OSPF router ID. So before starting I request you all to press subscribe button and bell icon so that you can get the update on time. So guys, let's start with the router ID. In this video I'm going to use this topology. This is my broadcast segment and this is my point-to-point segment. So let's check how router ID will behave in all vendors. So first we will check with the Cisco. Okay, so first I will let you know what is router ID. Router ID is just with name of the OSPF node, right? If you are receiving update from one node, it's giving the router ID. Okay, router ID is a name. It's just a name. It doesn't matter whether router ID is reachable or not in the network, right? It's just a name for a OSPF node. So if one router check is database, it's easily come to know that I am getting this particular LSA from router ID 6.6.6 or 10.10.1.2. So by default in in Cisco, if you did not configure the router ID manually in Cisco box, it will take a highest loopback IP address. If loopback is not there, it will take a highest physical IP address. Okay, so just let me check on R8. Show IP OSPF neighbor. So here my router ID for R1 is 10.1.1.10. Why 1.1.10? If you check on R1, I did not configure show IP OSP. Sorry, show. Sorry, show run section OSPF. I did not configure router ID manually. Okay, show IP interface brief, and I have a three loopback interface configured, and out of that three, this one is my the highest. So by default, Cisco is taking my highest loopback IP. If these three loopback IPs are not there, then my what is my router ID? My router ID will become this 10.10.1.1. Okay, so let's go on R8. Sorry, let's check R8. What is the router ID of R8 here? Show IP OSP, oh, sorry, OSPF neighbor. Router ID of R8 is 10.10.1.8. Now go on R8. Show show I show IP int brief. Why it is taking 10.10.1.8? Because only one physical interface is configured, no loopback IP is configured, no no manually I have given the router ID. If I given the router ID manually, what happened is CONFT I router OSPF 10 area 0, sorry, router ID is the command. If I give the router ID 8.8.8, I can give anything in router ID, right? In this format, I can give 30.30.30. Doesn't matter whether it is reachable or not. So if I'm giving 8.8, what is saying we need to clear the OSPF for we need to reload the OSPF to take this command in effect. Okay, so just let clear the OSPF, clear OSPF, clear router, no, not router, IP OSPF 10 process. Yes. So now let's check on R1. Show this. Look 8.8.8. Why still this 10.10.1 is showing? Because it's dead interval is because of the dead interval. Once the dead interval will expire, it will goes flush out the LSA. So we will discuss about that intervals in other videos. So right now we are checking this only concentrating only on router ID. Once that dead interval will be expired, this old entry will be flushed out from OSPF database. Okay, if we check on 6, show IP OSPF neighbor. Look, 1.1.1. Now it is gone. Okay, so that is the Cisco thing. Another thing I will show for R6 it's showing 6.6.6.6 because I have configured it manually. Here you can see that, right? And one more thing. Now come to Juniper. In Juniper, what happened is if you check on R1, right? What is the router ID for Juniper? 10.1.2. Now go on Juniper. Show interface ters. Sorry, run show interface ters. So now, just now I said that if loopback is not configured, highest physical IP will be your router ID. So in this case, you can say that you say that this should be the router ID for R2, but in case of Juniper, it is completely reverse. In case of Junipers, the router ID will be the lowest physical address. If the loopback is configured, the lowest loopback IP is your router ID. If loopback is not configured, then lowest physical address is your router ID. That is the Juniper thing. So Juniper is completely reversed than Cisco in case of router ID behavior. Okay. That is why it is showing 10.1.2 here on R1. So how we can configure the router ID manually on Juniper? There is a catch in a Juniper. Under OSPF we cannot configure the router ID. We need to configure the router ID in under routing options. Edit, or you can just set routing options router ID. So if it is it's router 2, I can give 2.2.2. Okay, and what I need to give is commit. So once I give the commit, check on router 1, any changes happens. So 2.2.2 is showing, right, dr other, and it will be flushed 10.10.1.2 after the dead interval was required expire. We need to wait for some time. So on R8, show router IP OSPF neighbor. So now it's changed here. Okay, and now come to Nokia. What is my router ID is? If I checked on Nokia, show router. Oh, sorry, run OSPF. Run. What is the command here in Juniper? Show OSPF neighbor. Sorry. So for router 3 it's showing 10 dot sorry, for router 3 it's showing 10.2.2. So now go on Nokia. Show router interface. So in a Nokia, what interface is configured is 10.10.2. So that is why it is taking it as a router ID. In a Nokia, there is one catch, it will not consider the loopback IPs, right? Although they here loopback IP is configured, it will not consider the loopback IP. It will always take the physical IP address. in case of Nokia. Also, we can configure the loopback IP router ID manually in Nokia as well. Configure router OSPF router ID. You can say we can configure 20.20.20 here. 20.20.20 dot. Okay, now same thing which it's saying in OSPF shut. No shut. That router ID will not take effect until shutdown was BGP was not clear or unshut. No shut. So let's check here. Show router run show OSPF neighbor. So it will. Oh, here is the ID, right? In Juniper router ID showing here only. Okay. What we have changed on? We have changed on 8, we have changed on 6. One is taking a highest loopback IP, and for Nokia it's taking we have configured it manually. So guys, that is all about the router ID in OSPF. You just need to remember it is a name and it's behave differently in all multi-vendor environment. For all vendors, they have differently behave, which I have showed you. So thank you, and subscribe my channel and press bell icon so that you can get the update on time. Also, I'm sharing my Telegram group link in description. You can join that so to get more and more study material and video updates. Thank you.